Time community, and welcome to the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru. I'm Teresa.
And I'm Tim.
And together, we're going to walk through Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time book series. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I am doing much better than I was last week. Much better week.
Yay!
So before we get started, we want to remind you that this is a reread. We assume that you've read the entire series, so there will be spoilers. You have been warned. All right, Tim, what are we going to be doing in today's episode?
Today we're discussing chapters 42 and 43 of The Great Hunt, where the girls try to figure out a way to rescue Egwene from the Seanchan. Chapter 42 is called Falme, and the icon is the Seanchan battle helmet.
Here's a quick summary to act as a reminder for those of you who are not reading along with us. Weeks after Egwene's abduction, Nynaeve and Elaine are in the streets of Falme trying to formulate a plan. While trying to hide from passing Soldam and Domine, Nynaeve spies a scrawny man that she swears is Padan Fain, but she dismisses this as ridiculous. There's no way he could be there. Elaine steals some apples from a fruit cart, and they argue about how little money they have left. They are interrupted by a Seanchan patrol, and they force themselves into submission as not to draw notice. Elaine expresses her frustration that the locals aren't rising up and fighting back. But Nynaeve points out that the Seanchan monsters are too much to expect anyone to fight against. I mean, they have dragons. Not to mention the Domine. They were so shocked to find the Domine themselves were not as helpful as expected. When Nynaeve channeled at one to see if she could unfasten the collars, it was the Domine who raised the alarm, and the girls had to hide in their room for 3 days. They stake a spot across the street from the building that housed the Domine and try in vain to come up with a plan. Egwene stands at the window of her tiny room, keeping an eye on Rhenna and probing at her collar with the power, looking for a way to open it. Channeling without a Soldam wearing the bracelet made her feel sick, yet she persisted. Her training so far had been painful and humiliating. She has been treated like a dog, like a thing, with as yet undetermined value. The Soldam have been testing her channeling, forcing her and stretching her, and she knows she can handle more of the power now. Min comes in for her weekly visit in a dress. The Seanchan allowed her to stay and visit Egwene, but only if she follows their rules. Egwene tells Min that Rhenna gave her a test, and she showed a talent for finding metal ore. This makes her much more valuable than other Domine. Min tells her that she has found a ship for them to escape, and Egwene tells her to go on without her. Now that her talent has been discovered, she is being sent back to Seanchan. She tells Min that she knows 2 Aes Sedai have been collared, and they are losing the will to fight back. She talks about how hopeless she feels, and when Min expresses concern for her safety, explains that the Seanchan take measures to make sure Domine can't hurt themselves. The torture and mental conditioning is extensive, and Egwene is starting to give up. Min doesn't know what to do. Rhenna enters for training. When she puts on the bracelet, she can tell that Egwene had been channeling without permission. Rhenna tells Egwene that she's been too lenient with her, and that she can no longer keep her name. Her new name is Tuli. Rhenna kicks Min out, and she has no choice but to leave Tuli to be punished.
I think it says a lot about Nynaeve that when she imagines really bad things that could be done to Leandrin, she still feels guilty about it later.
Yeah.
Not a lot of guilt, just a little.
Yeah.
She still sees Leandrin as a human, even if she is a dark friend.
Yeah.
And that says something about Nynaeve's character.
Yeah. Nynaeve's a good person.
I do like the Padan Fain drive-by we get here.
Right.
With Rand and company stressing out about how they're going to find him in the previous chapter, it's kind of funny that Nynaeve sees him in the street and is like, nah, that's not him.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. He can't be here.
Yeah.
I love how confident that Nynaeve was the last time we saw her, that they had plenty of money. She told Elaine that she was still thinking like a princess and that they'd be able to last a while with what they had. But here, it's been a couple weeks, and Nynaeve is regularly skipping meals, and Elaine is stealing apples because everything is more expensive than she thought.
Yep.
Nynaeve always comes off as so competent and in charge, and she certainly takes the lead whenever she can. But we have to remember that she's just as green as the others, you know? Like, she hasn't seen anything of the world beyond what we've read so far.
Right.
So in some ways, Elaine is more savvy than Nynaeve because at least she has learned a little more of the world as princess. Nynaeve does an excellent job at making her way through these adventures, so it's easy to forget that she has no experience with any of this.
Yeah. After reading this a few times, I think Nynaeve is really starting to like Elaine.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she only bothers to badger or threaten people she cares about. And the things that she's getting on Elaine's case about are things Nynaeve thinks she should know better about.
Yeah.
Yes, Nynaeve is prickly, and yes, she needs to find a better way to communicate. But she's already started treating Elaine as one of her own people. Mm-hmm. You know, like an overbearing but well-meaning big sister. So do as I say, not as I do kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
On the one hand, I agree with Elaine that the people of Falme should put up some kind of resistance. But that could be because I, like Elaine, have never had to stand up to an invading force that flattened the army defending my country.
Yeah.
As an American, yes, I've watched my country come under attack from terrorists, and we've been on the losing side of conflicts a few times, but we've never lost a war against a foreign power on our own home soil. Mm-hmm. Neither is Andor, at least in the recent past, and that anyone alive can remember. It's easy to stand in judgment when you don't share the experience of others.
Yeah. Nynaeve does have a point, though. How can you expect regular folk to stand against literal monsters and Aes Sedai on leashes who kill you without even having to get close?
True.
For the people in all the places the Seanchan have conquered, as long as they can't channel, their lives have gone on pretty much the same as before the Seanchan came. Falme is a little different because that's where the Seanchan set up shop. But for people who don't know anyone who has been collared, they just stay out of that part of town and keep on living their lives. They just have to reconcile with themselves that they sat back and let their people be taken away.
Yeah.
It's tempting to stand back and let it happen as long as it isn't happening to you. Elaine gets down on them for passively watching their neighbors get taken away or locked up and watching families get separated. At least the people of Falme have the excuse of going against magic and dragons, as opposed to just a corrupt government and ice agents. Ooh. People are weak, and it's easy to say it's not my problem when the odds feel insurmountable. I guess we all have to ask ourselves what atrocities we're willing to put up with to keep our own security intact. That, and hope our neighbors make nobler choices when someone comes for us.
True. So just as we're getting settled into this point of view from Nynaeve, we switch to Egwene. Part of the reason I hate the Seanchan so much is that Jordan does a good job demonstrating how they view Domine as property. But what makes me so angry is that everything described here about the daily life of a Domine reminds me of the way people used to break horses in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Growing up in an agricultural community, so much of the way that Egwene is treated reminds me of the way people treat livestock. With care and the most humane way possible, but with the understanding that the life's purpose was to serve humans in some way or another.
Mm-hmm. I just want to take a quick break from Egwene and talk about Min for a moment. So here's what the book says about Min's clothes being burned and her new dress. Quote, "Everyone has a place in the pattern," she mimicked, "and the place of everyone must be readily apparent. That old hag Mullion apparently got tired of not knowing what my place was on site and decided I ranked with the serving girls." End quote. That is such a relevant struggle today for non-binary folks and trans folks.
Yeah.
Like, I think part of the hate they receive is because people don't know how to categorize them, and it makes some people very uncomfortable. Uh-huh. They don't understand and can't figure out where to place them on site. And for some reason, that confusion makes them very angry. And of course, I want to say to them that people don't fit in boxes and they need to get over it and stop being an asshat. But I don't know. Like, this part just really stuck out to me this time, you know?
Yeah, I get that. Sometimes when I read this chapter, I can only focus on how messed up the situation is and the injustice of what the Seanchan are doing to female channelers. But there are times when I read this and realize that part of the reason it pisses me off so much is that Rena is trying to break Egwene's sense of self. Everything about her life right now, is about programming her to be a tool and to act accordingly. When Min knocks on the door and it startles Egwene, or when she talks about how hopeless she is, I'm forced to remember that even the strongest people will start to show signs of breaking when they're subject to this kind of treatment. At the same time, I wonder if she never went through this time of captivity with the Seanchan, would she have had what it takes to pull off her coup in the tower later on? What do you think?
I don't know, but probably not. I think she needed this experience to show her how bad it could get and how much she could survive. And then she needed her time with the wise ones to teach her how to embrace pain and how to survive it intact.
Yeah.
If the Seanchan taught her how much she could take before it broke her, the wise ones taught her how to take more without breaking.
Right.
But I don't know if she could have really learned that lesson without first having her experience in Falme. And she needed both to get through her ordeal in the tower in a way that would inspire others to fight.
That's a really great insight. Awesome.
So Egwene's given up.
Yeah, she has.
She's telling Min to remember her because she can't see a way out of this. Everything that makes her Egwene Alvir is being stripped away from her, and she's completely losing herself. So we didn't really talk about how surprised Nynaeve and Elaine were that the Domine raised the alarm when she felt channeling at her collar.
Right.
We'll see this a lot, how the Domine defend their souldom and don't want to be freed. This systematic stripping of self and brainwashing that the Seanchan do is very cult-like, you know?
Yeah.
Like, the Domine get new names, and their training is so intense that they can't hold on to themselves. Plus, there's the whole addictive part to the power. So, if they're only allowed to channel when a Soldam wants them to, it's the only time they get a fix. Egwene is jonesing for the power. So combine that with the pain and the punishment, it's almost impossible to fight back, even after just a couple weeks. When she talks about the yellow sister, Rima, she says that she fought them as long and as hard as she could, and it's not her fault that she doesn't have the strength left to fight any longer. And the same thing is happening to Egwene.
Yeah.
She's quickly reaching that breaking point.
Yeah. So sad.
Yeah, it just sucks.
And that wraps up chapter 42. But before we get to chapter 43, here's a quick word from our sponsors.
Today's episode of the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru is brought to you by Stolen Apples. Stolen apples, sweet, juicy, and affordable, no matter how broke you are. You may be able to oppress the people, but their fruit will always be liberated, one way or another.
Chapter 43 is called A Plan, and the icon is the Adam.
Feeling like a coward, Min runs from Egwene's screams, knowing that she would only make it worse if she tried to help. She runs smack dab into Elaine and Nynaeve on the street and fills them in on Egwene's capture and the ship captain she has found for escape. But she tells them that she doesn't think there's enough time to convince him to sail because Egwene is being shipped off to Seanchan in a few days. Nynaeve tells Min to take her to this captain, and she will do the convincing. Min takes them down to the harbor to meet none other than Captain Bail Doman himself, Kel Surprise. Doman tells them that Turok has him spinning tails like a gleeman, but he thinks that once he's no longer entertained, he just might have Doman's head cut off rather than let him go. Nynaeve tells them that they want passage on his ship and to be ready to sail as soon as they're on board. But Doman tells her he can't get past the Domine. Nynaeve pulls out her great serpent ring, indicating that she is Aes Sedai, and that Doman would have 3 channelers to go up against the Domine if he agrees to take them. Doman, the upstanding pirate that he is, warns them of what they could face if they don't leave immediately. He's seen 3 women colored, and it has disturbed him. He asks if they're trying to free the captured Aes Sedai. Nynaeve tells him that he knows all he needs to know, and she demands an answer from him, saying that there are other ships, and she means to have an agreement that day. Doman tells them that he will do it. Once out on the street again, Nynaeve sags against the wall, and Min is surprised to see all of her bravado evaporate. Nynaeve explains that sometimes you have to fake it till you make it and go in with both barrels showing, even if you don't have the ammo to back it up. Then she tells them that they best be off because they have one or two small problems to work out yet. And they set off to plan a rescue.
I just love Nynaeve's response when Min finds them in the streets and asks if it's really her. She simply says, none other. Because there really is only one Nynaeve and no one could ever imitate her.
Except no substitutes.
Exactly.
I feel really bad for Min.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Egwene has it worse because she's the one being tortured, but Min feels wretched. You know, she's the kind of person who would normally be fighting to save Egwene, like when she stabbed that soldier who was trying to get Elaine.
Yep.
But she has seen that her interference only hurts Egwene more. So she has to just let it happen. And she feels so guilty.
Yeah.
She feels like a coward and she feels useless. And in some ways, I think she feels complicit in Egwene's pain because she isn't doing anything to stop it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is misplaced. I mean, it's not Min's responsibility, you know? Like, it's not her fault.
And she can't do anything about it.
Right. But she feels like it's her fault. That if she was a better person, she'd figure out a way to save Egwene, you know?
Yeah. It's one of the things we love about her.
It is. Absolutely.
In the midst of Min and Nynaeve trying to figure out the next step, Elaine says, I wish Rand were here. And I get that this is set up for the we need brains, not brawn joke, but it just really falls flat for me.
I actually disagree. Like, I don't think this is a joke. It's a stereotype, but that's what Elaine is after. Elaine is used to having men swoop in and protect her. She had Gawain for the little things, and the Queen's Guard when there was real danger. She's not even necessarily wishing for Rand specifically, but for a man with a sword to protect them. Nynaeve is saying that swords and muscles aren't the answer here. They've seen the evidence of what happens when someone confronts the Seanchan head on. What Elaine wants, a man to come in and physically fight for them, won't help. All he could do is come in and die. What they need is to put their heads together and come up with a plan to save themselves by tricking the Seanchan and hitting the problem from a different direction. So, I mean, it's actually kind of an important moment for Elaine's development. She would never have become the Battle Queen of Andor if she waited around for a man to save her all the time. True. And that starts here.
I hadn't seen it that way. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think that in this instance, because I get what you're saying. Like, we hear Nynaeve talking about men always thinking with the hair on their chest and blah, blah, blah. Like, she's as bad as Tom.
Yeah, she is. Sometimes.
But I don't think that's what's happening in this particular instance. So Min has another quick viewing of the girls. She sees a large man's ring over Nynaeve's head, which she recognizes in a few pages later as Lan's ring. I guess that's just a note to the reader to say, don't worry, I haven't forgotten this love story. We'll get there. And then over Elaine's head, quote, a red-hot iron and an axe. They meant trouble, she was sure, but it seemed distant, somewhere in the future, end quote. I have no idea what that means. Like, the closest thing I can think of is maybe Perrin, but he's less real trouble to her and more of just an annoyance, you know? Like, she doesn't love Lord Perrin of the Two Rivers, but it's not like he's a danger to her or anything. I don't know. Like, I feel like this is maybe something that RJ meant to do, but then changed his mind later when the time came. I don't know. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm on board with that sentiment because anytime we see the axe, it's almost always a Perrin reference in this story. Yeah. Almost, I think it is exclusively like the axe is always Perrin.
Although usually it's a hammer though.
Like, yeah, because that's Perrin's dilemma. Is it the axe or the hammer? That's his thing throughout the whole series. Yeah, and then the red hot iron.
I mean, that could be a blacksmith thing, which is why I said maybe it's Perrin, but it just doesn't seem like that makes any sense.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily apply. I mean, we don't see anything about Elaine impact Perrin's journey as a blacksmith into something else. We don't. She's not that integral to a storyline, so it doesn't really.
Yeah,
apply.
I mean, she gets kind of pissed at him when he becomes Lord of the Two Rivers, and Marguerite has to.
Maybe her mom should have sent a tax collector every now and then. I'm just
Right?
saying, that's not Perrin's fault.
Maybe Andor should have just cut them off for generations. But,
Yeah, literal
whatever.
generations. Yeah.
So, I mean, she does have something to do with Perrin, and Perrin is kind of a thorn in her side for a couple books. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, as soon as they have a meeting, everything's worked out.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Like, it just doesn't feel true to say that this is about Perrin. I don't know, though. I mean, I feel like this is something that RJ had a plan for, but when the time came to actually write those scenes, whatever his plan didn't make sense anymore.
Right.
So,
well, and maybe at the time he was writing this, he was still actually thinking it'd be only 3 or 4 books.
Right, yeah. And then 10 books later, he's like, yeah, that doesn't work.
It never came about. Oh, well.
They won't care.
No one will ever catch that.
No one's going to deep dive into this and try to figure all these things out.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway.
So that's what I think.
I don't know, guys. What do you think? Let us know. Like, tweet at us, email at us. What am I saying? The point is, tell us your opinion.
So Captain Doman must be a really good storyteller. He's still alive and even managed to sell cargo while in port.
Yeah.
I love how he's always talking about his aged grandmother.
Me too.
Doman is just a great character.
He really, really is. Yeah, I love his aged grandmother. So this is the first time that the Supergirls pretend to be Aes Sedai.
That's right.
And Nynaeve does it without consulting the others. She pulls that ring out, and both Elaine and Min are like, "What the frack are you doing, dude?" Like, Nynaeve reminds me so much of Moraine in this scene. She plays it so brilliantly. Even with Min and Elaine making comments that are far from helpful. Like, okay, this is a village woman whose only experience with negotiations is browbeating the Emmonsfield Village Council. True. I don't know where she learned to play Dies Damar so well, but she plays it like a champ.
She sure does. Nynaeve is really good at selling her ability in this scene, even though she really has no idea how the 3 of them would defend against Domine.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's also the small matter of Egwene still having a collar that Nynaeve has not been able to figure out how to take off.
Yeah.
So this is a great plan, but she's basically Matt bluffing his way out of a card game.
Yeah, definitely. I love that Bail Doman is a stand-up guy when it really matters.
Yeah.
And he has to warn the girls about seeing the Aes Sedai captured. It was really disturbing to him, and he's haunted by it.
Yeah.
He says, quote, "I would leave my aged grandmother standing on the dock to sail from here, but I did have to tell you." So for all of his bluster and faults, Doman really is a good guy with a good heart.
He really is.
I really like that.
Yeah.
Min and Elaine learn a lot from Nynaeve early on. They both look to her to take the lead and are so sure that she can do anything because she often acts like she can, you know? And I love that we see her here explain that she's not actually as confident as she seems. Sometimes you have to bluff and pray that no one calls you on it. They do a lot of growing up in these first few books.
They really do. I really like who they become later on.
Mm-hmm. And Nynaeve has a lot to do with that.
Uh-huh. And that's it for chapters 42 and 43 of The Great Hunt. Join us next week for chapters 44 and 45, where 5 ride to Falme and the girls put their plan into action.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Wheel of Time Pod-Thru.
We'll see you again next week. Make sure that you rate and subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. If you could leave us a positive review, it really helps us out. It makes us more visible so more people can find us. You can tweet us at Pod-Thru or email us at whatpodthru@gmail.com and tell us your thoughts for anything we covered today.
That's WOTPODTHRU@gmail.com. Thanks, everybody, and we hope the wheel weaves you in our direction again soon. Stop the podcast. I'm out of coffee.
Some more.